Hello and welcome to the WisTech webinar number 1 for 2026. And today's webinar, we will be covering transportation and community access, getting from point A to B, and welcoming Angela Brenna and Nichole Hysel as our presenters today. So a little bit of housekeeping. So we will have closed captioning as well as sign language interpretation. This video will be archived and available on our YouTube channel. And we will be providing CEUs and CRCs for those who attended the live session. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters today, Nichole and Angie. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki, and I am an ATP. I work within the Department of Health Services, and I'm an assistive technology professional. And my background is working with individuals who are needing modifications to a vehicle or assistive technology related to transportation.
And hello, I'm Angela Brenna. I am a program and policy analyst within the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and happy to be here today. I am also a person with a disability and a wheelchair user, so I do bring kind of real lived experience to this presentation. I think we're ready to move on to slide 2. All right, I want to give a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. This slide is text-based and outlines our learning objectives for the session. By the end of this presentation, participants should be able to identify at least 3 barriers that can impact transportation and community access for people with disabilities. We'll also talk through different disability areas that can affect transportation access, because transportation barriers aren't limited to physical disabilities. Sensory, cognitive, and communication-related disabilities can all impact access as well. And finally, we'll cover common transportation adaptations, modifications, and tools that can help improve independence, safety, and participation. Next slide, please. Transportation access is something many people don't think much about until it becomes difficult or unavailable. This slide includes an image of a wheelchair user boarding public transit using an accessible ramp. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, approximately 18.6 million Americans have a disability that impacts transportation access. And this issue extends beyond disability alone. AARP has noted that many people will outlive their driving years by 7 to 10 years. Here in Wisconsin, this issue is especially relevant. According to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, approximately 31% of Wisconsin residents are non-drivers. That includes people with disabilities, older adults, young people, and others who may not drive for a variety of reasons. Transportation access is deeply connected to independence. It affects healthcare access, employment, education, social engagement, recreation, and overall quality of life. When transportation barriers exist, they can significantly limit a person's ability to fully participate in their community. Next slide, please. Disability impacts. When we talk about transportation access, it's important to recognize how many different skills transportation actually requires. This slide is text-based and focuses on how disability can affect transportation access across multiple functional areas. Using transportation requires physical coordination, sensory awareness, communication, problem solving, and decision-making. Because of that, transportation barriers can look very different depending on the individual. For someone with a mobility disability, the barrier may be physically entering a vehicle. For someone with low vision, navigation may be the challenge. For someone with cognitive disabilities, route planning or handling unexpected disruptions may be difficult. Accessibility is about the full transportation experience, not just physical access, I'm sorry. Next slide. Definitions. This slide is text-based and defines 2 related but different concepts. Community mobility refers to moving around outside the home in ways that allow participation in daily life. Things like errands, appointments, work, recreation, or social activities. Transportation Transportation is a broader term that generally refers to traveling longer distances between destinations, such as getting to school, healthcare, work, or between communities. Transportation includes public and private systems, as well as travel by road, rail, air, or water. These concepts overlap, but they're not exactly the same. Next slide, please. Slide 2 here, we're going to continue with definitions. This slide compares public and private transportation. Public transportation refers to transportation systems operated by governments and available to the public, such as city buses, trains, transit systems, and paratransit. Private transportation includes transportation owned by individuals or private companies, such as personal vehicles, rideshare services, taxis, rentals, or non-emergency medical transportation. Private transportation may offer more flexibility, but often comes with a greater cost. Next slide, please. Personal mobility. This slide includes an image of an individual using a wheelchair outdoors alongside pedestrians, illustrating community movement and access. Personal mobility is slightly different from transportation. This refers to a person's ability to physically move themselves from one place to another. This may include walking, bicycling, using mobility scooters, or using wheelchairs. For many people, transportation access starts with personal mobility. Because even transportation itself is technically accessible, someone still needs to be able to safely navigate the environment around it. Next slide, please. And then this is autonomous vehicles. Laura, if you would mind.
Sure. So we have a new category that is emerging in our public streets and communities, and that is autonomous vehicles. On the screen is an image of a Waymo, which is a fully autonomous vehicle system, vehicle available in numerous cities around the United States. This is a category of transportation where there is no driver. So relying upon higher end technology such as LiDAR, GPS, cameras, and significant computer learning and training, these vehicles are able to navigate our communities without a driver. And we also have, those are fully autonomous. And then there's also semi-autonomous, which many of you maybe have heard of self-driving mode for Teslas, for example. So those vehicles still do require some human involvement, but there are modes that will park the car, drive the car. Essentially, the human is there to sort of monitor for safety, provide backup guidance for that vehicle. There are 2 links on this page that will give further information on these autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles. Next slide.
All right, this is Nikki. This slide includes text and a picture of an individual using a wheelchair who is situated at the bottom of a quite long set of stairs. And he is sitting there in his wheelchair looking at the stairs, presumably wondering how he's going to access that upper level in the community. So that being said, accessing the community through both public and private transportation is a complex task, and it requires a lot of different skills. In the next few slides, we'll be reviewing those skills in more detail. The physical skills, so the navigating sidewalks and crosswalks, transferring into and out of a vehicle, fastening seatbelts and other safety restraints, and physically operating the vehicle's controls like the steering or braking, all take specific physical skills. So moving on to sensory skills, this slide includes both text and photos, images. The images include a pathway or a sidewalk that is made out of brick, and that brick is buckling up. It looks like it's due to a tree root. And then the photo below it includes a walkway with a lot of water that's pooled due to rain. So sensory skills include all of the senses, acuity, vision, acuity, and field of vision to recognize safety hazards, read road signs, and identify obstacles. Tactile is another sensory skill that involves the hands and feet. So feeling the controls of the vehicle, feeling around for any safety hazards like slippery sidewalks, auditory skills or hearing, the ability to process sounds, to hear announcements on public transportation, sirens, and other important auditory information. Cognitive skills. Cognitive skills include time management, so managing those routes, whether you're riding the bus or taking a car, and estimating the amount of time it might take you to get somewhere, which can be a pretty complex task. I know in my work, I have to plan routes to various communities frequently, and that takes a lot of planning. Using technology to figure out how long it takes to get somewhere, sometimes reading maps, spatial awareness and orientation, navigating in unfamiliar places, and reading maps or schedules. Problem solving includes addressing those unexpected challenges as they come up, whether we're riding on a bus that's taking a little bit extra time, or where we run into road construction and we're facing being late. Sustained and divided attention is staying focused on the task of traveling safely while managing other distractions in the environment. And lastly, emotional regulation includes staying calm and composed in high pressure and stressful situations. So for example, being in a crowded space and having a tight schedule, navigating through those crowds, possibly managing other individuals within that environment, and being able to keep calm and regulated so you're able to move forward. All right. Communication skills, another important skill involved in transportation. Communicating with drivers, whether it be public transportation or a family friend, being able to communicate and ask for information is also an important skill. I think we all know friends or family that are hesitant to ask for assistance, but as a person with a disability, that can be difficult for a lot of reasons. Telecommunication skills, including using a cell phone or using a computer to schedule rides and schedule rides with those accommodations. The ability to use non-verbal car signals, such as turning signals and the car horn, to communicate with other drivers would be another way of communicating.
This is Angie, I believe. Summary of transportation barriers is back to me, Angie. This slide includes images of map transportation routes, illustrating differences in access and actual travel options in Wisconsin, which I believe, Laura, this is a real life example that you have if you want to share.
Sure, this is Laura. So on the screen are two Google Map images, and it's to show how to get from Eau Claire, Wisconsin to Chippewa Falls, which are pretty much not separated, but they are two distinct cities in two different counties, but with full, business and residential development between the two. So the top one is if I'm a driver and I put in a route from Eau Claire to Chippewa Falls, it shows me a couple different options on how to get there and my travel time as a personal driver. If I were to change that setting in Google Maps to public transportation, on the screen, it'll show you there are no routes between those two cities. Again, located 9 or 10 miles apart, and there is no public transportation between the two. So if I lived in Eau Claire but worked in Chippewa Falls, I would have to find private transportation and couldn't just hop on a bus and go.
This is Angie. I think that that's a really great example. I still have more to say on that. The lack of accessible transportation options, particularly in this example, like in rural communities, are a big barrier. Physical accessibility barriers might also include things like inaccessible sidewalks, curb cuts, bus stops, transfers, or vehicle entry. Cost is another major barrier. Inaccessible transportation options and modifications to a personal vehicle can be expensive. Geographic isolation creates additional barriers where transportation systems are limited or, like in this case, non-existent. And information accessibility matters too, because transportation that exists but can't be independently accessed due to inaccessible schedules, apps, or communication tools still creates a barrier. Next slide.
This is Nikki. Next, we will be talking about several of the professionals that provide services in the area of transportation and community mobility. These professionals primarily assist in the process of obtaining equipment required to ride in a vehicle with modifications, and also to be able to drive as a person with a disability. So the first one is the Certified Driver Rehabilitation Specialist, or CDRS. A CDRS is an individual usually with a background in occupational therapy. They have taken extensive training in all of the things required to be a CDRS, including assessing and training individuals with disabilities to drive safely using adaptive equipment. They evaluate the individual's driving abilities. They recommend those modifications to the vehicle and provide specialized driving instruction that often looks like, getting in a vehicle with that individual, with that equipment, and teaching them how to use that equipment safely. Certified Driving Rehab Specialists have passed a certification exam from the Association for Driver Rehab Specialists, or ADED. The next professional is a Driver Rehabilitation Specialist, or DRS, and DRPs for Driver Rehab Professionals. So these are individuals who don't have as extensive certifications or training, but also assist with the process of obtaining either a driver's license to drive with modifications or to receive specific equipment. So they work with individuals who have mild to moderate mobility, cognitive, or sensory impairment. They assess and improve the individual's ability to operate a vehicle. So that assessment could look like using a simulated driving situation to assess for reaction time, using the brake, scanning for obstacles in the environment. They help individuals a lot of times also regain driving abilities. So they might work on that reaction time. They might simulate of the vehicle using a pedal that's situated on the floor, and then use a stop sign out in front of them and have, the stoplight turn red, and then the individual presses the brake. So they're assessing all of those skills to be able to regain their driving abilities. DRPs and DRPs and DRSs also hold a micro credential in certifying them as the providers of basic and low-tech driver rehabilitation programs. So they may recommend lower tech options like simple transfer seats or transfer bars to help an individual get in and out of the vehicle. So those individuals just do things a little more simple. All right. Additional professionals, we have the OT and the PT, so occupational therapists and physical therapists. Occupational therapists have a really deep understanding in activity analysis, so taking the activity of driving and breaking it down into all of the sort of micro skills required to drive. And then they assess each one of those skills. So they are focusing on helping individuals gain or regain their independence in daily activities, including transportation. Physical therapists more work on the physical function in the lower body, and they work to improve that movement in physical function. So they might focus a little more on transferring in and out of the vehicle, approaching the vehicle, sitting up in the vehicle, and using the controls physically. Orientation and mobility specialists provide assessment and training for people with vision loss. So they might help an individual regain access to the community through the use of specialized canes or other technology. Mobility and equipment dealers, or MEDs, demonstrate how to use modifications and equipment and provide and install adaptive driving equipment and vehicle modifications. And they also inspect the vehicles to make sure that they're set up for safe use. So those MEDs are looking at the specific vehicle that's going to be used to see if it can handle modifications, and that any non-original equipment to that vehicle is able to be installed within the vehicle. Some examples of MEDs include Buick Mobility, A&J Mobility, All-Star Mobility, and Mobility Works. So next, this is a text-based. Let's see here. We have mobility equipment dealers, or MEDs. They're again demonstrating how to use the modifications and equipment. I know a lot of times in my work, I recommend specific exterior modifications to vehicles, like wheelchair, lifts that are towed behind the vehicle. So they're showing individuals how to use those safely. That's just an example. They provide and install adaptive driving equipment and vehicle modifications. They inspect those vehicles to make sure they're set up for safe use. And they handle certified maintenance and repairs, which is another, really important factor in having a modified vehicle. We want to make sure that any modifications to that vehicle remain safe, and that they're inspected, and that any needed changes are made as needed. I see a lot of individuals who have maybe purchased a used modified vehicle, and maybe it didn't have the greatest maintenance or repair on a regular basis, so they deteriorate quicker if that doesn't happen. So it's just another important consideration. Local examples, we already sort of looked at those. And then we have the manufacturers of the actual vehicles that are able to be modified. So the manufacturers are designing and producing mobility devices, adaptive driving equipment, and seating systems. Manufacturers work really closely with healthcare professionals to create products and improve mobility and independence for people with disabilities. So not all manufacturers of vehicles make vehicles that can be modified. So a few of the manufacturers that are currently producing modifiable vehicles are Toyota, General Motors, Ford, Braun Ability, and Vantage Mobility. So the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association, or NMEDA for short, is a nonprofit, and they are dedicated to enhancing accessibility in the automotive industry for individuals with disabilities. They're mobility equipment dealers, manufacturers, and driving rehab specialists. They also oversee the Quality Assurance Program, which is a national accreditation for vehicle modification businesses in North America. NMEDA vendors manufacture Quality Assurance Program, or MQAP, guidelines for the production of adaptive vehicles, safety and product quality. They also provide independent reviews of compliance with motor vehicle safety standards. They do the crash testing and publish those results. They do it for manufacturers of accessible vehicles. And then they provide training and resources. NMEDA has a really great website that has a very broad library of information. So we're often referring the individuals that we work with to the NMEDA website. They have searches for those CDRSs. They have searches for local QAP vendors, and just a lot of information about individual devices. So just a really great website. All right, so talking about different modification purposes between being a driver and a passenger, those processes are just really different. If you're looking at modifying a vehicle, so a passenger may just go through the process of, speaking with their OT or speaking with that, DRP, the driving rehab professional, to recommend modifications that allow them to be a passenger in a vehicle. Being the driver with a disability requires a little bit more in-depth processes, like assessing for the driving ability and some training behind the wheel. And this slide includes the website for the Wisconsin Department of Motor Vehicles. The Wisconsin Department of Motor Vehicles will modify a driver's license, that paperwork, and the license itself that states that an individual drives with modifications as a driver. So that link provides more information on how to go about that process. That being said, the certified driving rehab specialist is always assisting in the process when an individual is the driver. So they help walk them through this process. All right, so there are a couple of different types of driving assessments. Whether you're the individual with a disability who's a passenger or the driver, these assessments will be important for being able to access that vehicle. So the driver's skills evaluation, I touched on that a little bit previously. That's usually an assessment that occurs like with an OT outside of a vehicle, and they are simulating driving skills and assessing those skills individually. So it can be a comprehensive in-car evaluation to identify strengths and weaknesses and driving abilities. So it's assessing for the reach time, the judgment, and the motor skills. Some of those assessments are paper and pencil or situational, where that CDRS or occupational therapist will assess cognition using standardized testing. And the recommendations during that driver skills evaluation can include additional training, a clinical driving assessment, or a recommendation to stop driving. A lot of times we'll see somebody lose part of their physical function, and their doctor may recommend that they withhold from driving until they have a driver skills evaluation. And a lot of times the result of that can be just regaining some of those skills. But a doctor isn't the specialist either. So referring to have that driver skills evaluation is just a really responsible step. And then there's the clinical driving assessment. This is completed by a CDRS, and it is often required in order for an individual to return to driving after an illness or injury that impacts their driving abilities. A lot of times I see personally where an individual has lost the function, like in their right leg, you know, the foot, the leg that controls those pedals. So often we will have them do the driver skills evaluation and then go through the clinical assessment with some different modifications to see which works best. So they also do an off-road assessment that evaluates their cognitive, visual, motor, and sensory skills, in addition to reviewing personal medical history. And then that on-road assessment towards the end of that process assesses the ability to perform driving specific tasks, such as accelerating, turning, stopping, and following traffic rules within the actual vehicle and out inside the community.
This is Angie. Disclaimers. This slide is text-based and includes important safety considerations related to adaptive vehicle equipment. For individuals who need vehicle modifications, such as hand controls, transfer devices, or adaptive driving systems, it's important to work with reputable professionals. Using the resources Nikki just shared is an important safety step in accessing transportation. Purchasing equipment online or attempting self-installation can create some significant safety risks, such as improper installation that can affect vehicle operation, occupant safety, legal compliance, and it usually nullifies any manufacturer warranties. So working with a certified professional helps ensure that equipment is safe and properly fitted. Next slide. Legislation. This slide is text-based and highlights key laws related to transportation accessibility. Transportation accessibility is shaped by several important laws that help protect the rights of people with disabilities. First, the Air Carrier Access Act, or ACAA, applies specifically to air travel. This law prohibits discrimination by airlines against passengers with disabilities. This includes things like providing wheelchair assistance, helping with boarding and deplaning, accommodating service animals within current rules, and assisting with mobility devices. Airlines are also responsible for making reasonable efforts to support accessible travel, although air travel protections work differently than the ADA, or Americans with Disabilities, protections. So one important distinction is that airlines are genuinely regulated under the ACAA in particular. But now we're going to move on to the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, which helps ensure equal access to transportation in many settings. Title II applies to public entities. So this includes public transit systems like city buses, public rail systems, commuter transit, and paratransit services. Under Title II, transportation providers must make their services accessible, which may include wheelchair lifts or ramps, stop announcements, accessible communication, and complimentary paratransit services for individuals who cannot use fixed route transit. Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to private businesses that offer private transportation services to the public. So that includes things like the hotel shuttles, airport transportation, taxis, or private bus services. Accessibility obligations can vary depending on the service, but the core principle is non-discrimination and access. Then we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, which is especially important for students. Under IDEA, transportation can be considered a related service if it's necessary for a student with a disability to access their education. So this might include accessible school buses, wheelchair lifts, adapted seating, specialized transportation supports, or other accommodations needed to safely get to and from school. And while it's not listed on this slide, I think it's worth mentioning that transportation access also intersects with broader civil rights protections and state level accessibility requirements, depending on the setting. The key takeaway here is that transportation accessibility isn't just a convenience issue, it is a civil rights issue. Next slide. Some key vocabulary. This slide is text-based and it introduces transportation-related terminology used throughout this topic. So transfer, Nikki, I know you already kind of touched on it a bit, but a transfer usually means moving from one location or position to another. So for example, when a person moves from their wheelchair into a vehicle seat. Accessibility means something that can be used regardless of disability. Primary driving controls means they're usually the controls necessary to operate a vehicle, such as steering, braking, and acceleration. Secondary controls refer or include things like turn signals, windshield wipers, and horns. Occupant protection refers to safety terms that protect people during a crash. You may also hear terms like OEM, which stands for the original equipment manufacturer, or TSA, Transportation Security Administration. Next slide.
All right.
Back to you.
Thanks. Now on to the fun part. We're going to go into some more specific types of vehicle modifications, some of them more low tech, a few will be higher tech. And the first topic we will discuss is transfer assistance. So transferring in and out of the vehicle. This slide here has several photos of various devices that assist individuals with disabilities to transfer in and out of vehicles. Some of the primary barriers I see when assessing individuals for transfers is, they're a wheelchair user. They have difficulty bending, squatting. Their lower extremities aren't as strong. Bending over and transferring into a seat is a pretty complicated task, but there are a few devices that can assist with that. The first device we have on this slide is called a handy bar. It is a portable handle that fits into the U-shaped plate on the vehicle's door frame. It offers support and stability while entering and exiting the vehicle. These devices often include some additional safety features. The metal end will break a window, and there's a seat belt cutter inside the handle as well that would assist with cutting a seat belt if that were needed. People really benefit from the handy bar, sometimes also called a car cane. They are anywhere from, I would say, $25 to $35, depending on which model you would choose or where you were to purchase that handy bar. It's handy, so I like the name. The next photo shows a swivel cushion. The swivel cushion is a great cushion that has the ability to, swivel. The individual would sit on this cushion inside of the vehicle, and it would assist with pivoting and transferring into the vehicles into a forward-facing position. And the next device is a car caddy. So the car caddy is a strap that attaches to the car window or the door frame, and it provides a handle to hold on to when getting in and out of the vehicle. And I've got it up there. The photo on the bottom depicts a transfer seat, often also called like a valet seat or just a swivel seat, but it's a higher tech seat. It replaces the original seat that comes with the vehicle, and swivel seats can be installed into the driver's to replace the driver's seat or the passenger seat. And they come out of the vehicle using a remote and just allow somebody with a disability, right, whether they're a wheelchair user or they use a walker, cane, able to access that seat in a different manner. So they sit down on it, they use the button, and the seat lifts them up and pivots them into the vehicle. A lot of times, individuals will replace the seat that's in the vehicle that is inaccessible, install a swivel seat. If they go to purchase a new vehicle, they can often put the original seat back in and then install the swivel seat into a new vehicle. That's pretty important. Okay, next we're moving on to accessibility. Accessibility for wheelchair users. Getting in and out of a vehicle can be really challenging as a wheelchair user. So we're looking at modifications to vehicles that assist the individual in a wheelchair or their caregiver to assist them inside of the vehicle and then restrain their wheelchair for safe transport. The first feature is a ramp. The photo in this slide includes a caregiver assisting an individual with a wheelchair up a rear access ramp that leads into a full-size van. And the lift in this slide includes a photo of an individual. It looks like they're using a wheelchair on a lift to transport the wheelchair into the vehicle. So it's sort of like an elevator. That individual is able to use a remote as well as they're positioned on that lift platform, and it lifts them up and into the vehicle for transport. So those are two options for wheelchair users to access modified vans. The next slide is going to review transporting mobility devices. So individuals who are able to transfer independently or with assistance into a original seat of the vehicle will often need to find various ways to transport their mobility device. So the first picture shows an external lift that is attached to the rear of what appears to be a car. A lot of times I work with individuals who don't have an SUV or a modified van, and they just really aren't interested or aren't able to afford purchasing a modified vehicle, but they still really need to transport their mobility device. They will often utilize a rear transport device. So they're able to either deploy a ramp manually or use a remote and then put their mobility device on the back of the device and transport it through the community. The photo below that is showing an individual wheelchair user transfer onto the driver's seat and then use a hoist. So he is taking that strap and he's attaching it to the frame of the wheelchair and then using a remote to lift the wheelchair up into the rear of his pickup truck. So hoists are typically installed inside the vehicle. Hoists are either installed in the back of a truck bed, in the back of the vehicle's hatch or trunk area. Hoists don't work with every vehicle. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to figure out which hoist works with which vehicle. But those mobility vendors have some specific tools. They're able to put in the specific information about the mobility device, the type of vehicle, to see if individual hoists will work. So they're really good matchers of devices in that situation if you're unsure. And then we have the platform lifts. They provide that sturdy platform that raises and lowers the device, making it simple to load and unload from the back of the vehicle. And then sometimes we're using ramps. In some situations, individuals will use like a portable ramp to push an unoccupied mobility device into the back of a vehicle. That sometimes is a good answer. And then travel trailers are often used. They look like a travel trailer for things like motorcycles or SUV or like four-wheelers. But they're specially made for mobility devices, so they're smaller, and they kind of keep that mobility device covered up, which can be really important in winter. During rain, we like to keep people's devices as clean as possible. So having that covered trailer is another good option. All right. Next, we have a slide with several photos of various driving controls. Driving controls are great for individuals who have barriers to feeling in their lower extremities, or they have barriers to grasp and just like overall hand function. So hand controls, there are various hand controls that can be attached to the steering wheel, and that puts the hand in any position that makes it work, right? So the bottom right photo in this slide shows an individual who is using an adaptive hand control that keeps his hand in a neutral position, which can be really important when individuals have limited range of motion in their wrist. The left foot accelerator in the top right photo is replacing the gas pedal. So that left foot accelerator is being installed to the left of the brake, and the individual with a loss of their right leg function, whether it be loss of sensation, sometimes they've had an amputation and they just don't have that function in the right side, they're able to fully control the vehicle, the gas and the brake using that left foot accelerator. We also have an image of pedal extensions. Those extenders are often used for people who are, shorter in stature and are unable to reach those foot and gas pedals. There's also a video attached to this slide that gives a really great review of various types of driving controls. These types of driving controls seem pretty simple, but we also like to acknowledge that our brains are really wired for driving in certain ways, right? So if you're used to driving with your right foot, that's all you've done your whole life, learning to drive with the left isn't as easy as you would think. So being able to access a certified driving rehab specialist or that clinical environment where they have that simulated is really beneficial for individuals to sort of retrain their brain to use those modifications. Next, we're just talking about a few accessory tools that can really help with transportation. The first photo on the top left is showing an individual using the key fob. We can assume that they're unlocking the door using the key fob, or that, my car personally, when my key fob moves close to the car, it automatically unlocks the door, which is a pretty cool feature. I also see a lot of individuals use key fobs as wheelchair users. They can open the door and deploy the ramp automatically, and then they're just able to navigate right up into the vehicle. The auto start is another great feature of a key fob. Being able to warm up that vehicle and get it started and ready to go is invaluable, right? It's invaluable for everyone. So kind of a universal thing. The top right photo depicts a seatbelt extender. Often when individuals are unable to twist or bend, having a seatbelt extender that's in closer range can be of benefit. They're also helpful for individuals with larger bodies. Just to be able to have that extra length of seatbelt can make a difference for people, with various disabilities. I know that seatbelt extenders in a lot of the transportation that I utilize. They're just automatically there. I know that, gosh, I think I was in the cities in Minneapolis, and all of the taxis that we used had the option to have a seatbelt extender. I wish I remembered the name of the vendor because I thought that was just really cool. The lower left image shows a gas cap cover. This is an adaptive device that covers the gas cap. The individual is able to fit it right over the top and use the adaptive handle that allows them to twist open the gas cap without straining their wrists or their fingers. This was a device that we had in our assistive technology library at my last job, and we would take it out and do sort of like senior fairs and just set things out on the table for people to inquire about and learn about. And it was a favorite. People thought that was just a really great tool. And the last lower right image depicts lane assist. Lane assist is a common feature in late model vehicles, and it's just a feature that you can turn on and off, helps individuals stay between the lanes and notify the driver if they are to navigate outside of those safety lines on the road. Some people don't like them, but if we're considering, I have a kiddo with ADHD, and I think that having that on in his driving history has kind of kept him aware of like, oh, I stopped paying attention. It's time to start paying attention again. All right. So the next slide is going to discuss mobility device securement. The photo in this slide shows a retractable restraint for a wheelchair. There are a few different types of restraints for wheelchairs. There's manual tie downs. They are straps that attach to the wheelchair at 4 anchor points on the vehicle floor. Retractable tie downs, such as the one in the image, they have 2 to 3 straps that attach to the vehicle floor. I've seen up to 4. And then they include a ratcheting mechanism. So when you pull up on that hook, it will come out of that sort of box there and adjust. So you attach it to the body of the wheelchair, and any excess of that belt will retract back in and secure that wheelchair. So similar to a seat belt. Docking systems are another way to restrain a wheelchair within a vehicle. They include a pin that's attached to the bottom of the mobility device, and then there is a docking station that is like screwed into the floor. It's attached pretty securely to the floor in really any seating position within the vehicle, and it allows that wheelchair user to just drive up the ramp, position themselves over the top of the docking station, and then that pin locks into the station. So it's just, it's there all the time. And that makes it very easy for individuals who want to be independent in driving, or just in general. They want to get in, they want to get out. With docking stations, they include a button that's usually located near the docking station that an individual can press, and then it releases that pin from the docking station.
This is Angie. Back to me. Hearing related accessibility. Transportation accessibility also includes communication access for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. This slide includes a visual of a Wisconsin deaf and hard of hearing communication card. It also includes an image of a seatbelt indicator that is installed on the shoulder portion of the belt. It says in large letters, special needs, next to a medical icon. It how dare you? It also says may resist help, may not recognize danger, and may not respond. Many transportation environments rely heavily on auditory information, things like announcements, alarms, verbal instructions, emergency signals, or warnings. Accessible alternatives can include visual alerts, vibration-based notifications, rear view cameras, lane departure warnings, impact detection alerts, and visual seatbelt indicators, like I just mentioned. Going back to the communication card that's shown here, this one is our Wisconsin DHS resource, and it's designed to help facilitate communication during traffic stops, emergencies, or other situations where communication may be more difficult. It uses the icons and written prompts to help identify needs or communication preferences, such as written communication, assistive listening devices, interpreters, or cart captioning. This resource can be found on the Wisconsin DHS Office for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing website. The goal is making sure important safety and communication information is not only delivered through sound. Next slide. And did we decide, Nichole, Laura, are you guys doing this one?
This is Laura. So we also have vision-related technology that can assist with driving access. So on the screen are two images. One is a wide-angle rear-view mirror. So this essentially goes over an existing rear-view mirror in a vehicle and has a very wide angle, so that can help eliminate blind spots. It's also good for someone that might have maybe a mobility disability where they can't turn their neck as well, or things like that, or chronic pain. It allows someone to have to turn their head less as they are driving. The other image is that of a glare shield. So I think we've all experienced driving into the sun, and it's difficult to see. So this can assist with the glare, not only of sun, but also of oncoming traffic. So some other tools and strategies would be to limit nighttime driving. If someone is experiencing some lesser vision capabilities at night, then they may want to consider running errands during the day, look at altering their drive times, which can be difficult in the northern regions when it's dark at 3:30 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon. There are some larger digital dashboard options. Another trick, which I didn't know about until a few years ago, was to dim your dashboard lights. That allows your eyes to have less adjustment between looking at the road and then looking down at your dashboard. You can also have fog lights or focused headlights are another option. Again, the glare reducing glasses or that glare guard, and then that wide angle mirror. Next slide. And then navigation, that's another thing that we do need to consider. And so on the screen is an individual that's sitting, it looks like on a park bench, looking at Google Maps. So the other tools that we do find that we use are our wayfinding apps, such as Google Maps, other tracking devices, methods to help us get from point A to point B. Our smartphones come with integrated GPS technology, but we can also use voice navigation as part of that. We can use these tools and apps to plan our routes. So most public transit is pretty much app-based these days. So in order to plan your route, you can actually do that within the public transit. So your mass transit or bus route. We use our apps to hail for rideshare services such as Uber and Lyft, or Waymo, as noted earlier, for our autonomous transportation. Other tools related with vision loss specifically are things like the Be My Eyes app, which is a volunteer-based app that you can use your smartphone and the camera to have a volunteer describe your surroundings for you. So you hold up the phone and that volunteer will describe what's happening around you. We're seeing a lot of advancement with smart glasses. Again, those aren't going to help you drive, but for navigating your community, you can use your glasses to tell you, what store am I in front of, or what street sign is this? And then again, using text-to-speech apps. So if someone isn't able to hear, they can use that text-to-speech. Or if they can't, they might want to just speak the directions if they're not able to spell something. So the apps are kind of endless in what those options are. Is we just think about them a little differently and apply it to community access and transportation. Next slide.
This is Angie, public transportation. This slide is text-based and outlines accessibility considerations for air and train travel. For air travel, resources like the TSA PreCheck, which does have an additional cost, or TSA Cares can help travelers with disabilities navigate airport screening, and services can be requested when booking travel with the airline. One important distinction from my own lived experience, while you often request disability accommodations through the airline, the actual physical assistance, such as the wheelchair support, airport navigation, boarding assistance, and transfer help, is provided by the airport staff rather than the airline. That matters because the quality of that experience can vary significantly depending on the airport and the communication between the airport and the airline. So in my own experience, some airports coordinate disability assistance extremely well, while others are a little bit more difficult or lacking. So you may find yourself leaving Minneapolis, heading somewhere else in another state with no issues. And then when you arrive, the boarding assistance in that airport may be difficult or different or feel next to non-existent. So even if assistance has been arranged in advance, my recommendation is always to arrive early, communicate as best you can with individuals that are working with you, because coordination issues are unfortunately pretty common. For train travel, I don't have a ton of experience with that. But again, I would imagine just like with your airline experience, you want to coordinate in advance. For train travel, accommodations may include accessible seating, wider aisles, accessible restrooms, and a dedicated mobility device space. As with air travel, again, like I said, with all of these, pre-planning helps make it smoother, especially as those issues may arise. Next. This slide is text-based and covers accessible bus transportation and vehicle rental options. Many public buses now include ramps, lifts, or low floor entry. Often these buses will include a certain amount of space that will have a seat removed for wheelchair users. So you may have the bus driver kind of stop and then strap you in. That is often an option, or if you want to transfer yourself and then you'd like your chair strapped down, these are often options on a bus. For individuals who cannot use standard fixed route transit, paratransit services may be available. Although for paratransit, there's often an eligibility requirement, or you need to kind of already be within a program to receive those, and advanced scheduling is often also required. Accessible rental vehicles are another option for individuals. Some major rental companies offer vehicles with hand controls or wheelchair accessible vans, but availability varies pretty significantly, so reservations should again be made in advance. Next. I don't know, this one's not me. Cruise ships?
And I am
Oh,
muted.
yeah, right.
So the third segment on public transportation, we just wanted to touch base on cruise ships. And while I personally have not been on a cruise, I've certainly been on smaller boat excursions. However, it's important to remember that cruise ships are under, if they operate under the US flag, they are covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, but be aware that there are cruise ships that dock in port in the US that may be flagged under another country. And so that is something you want to research ahead of time. I think our overarching advice is the plan ahead. But an interesting experience from our colleague, Jim Denham, is he recently was on a cruise, and Jim is an individual who is blind. And the cruise was excellent at offering someone to provide reading materials, like for the daily schedules and things like that. He said they would actually come to his room and read him the daily schedule or daily menu. However, all of that information was available on the app for the cruise, except it was not accessible for VoiceOver, the screen reading tool on his phone. So that's why they offered the human person to come and read. But you do need to ask again, what is the elevator access? What, are the cabins accessible? Is it a roll-in shower? Is it not a roll-in shower? And again, well in advance, notifying that cruise staff and requesting special seating for meals. That was one thing that Jim did. My understanding is the dining rooms in cruise ships can be very large. And so he had requested a specialized seating option where it was just within a few feet of the entrance doorway. So he didn't have to navigate through tables and chairs and people and waiters and all of that. So he was able to get to his assigned table much easier than had he not been proactive and made that request. And some cruises will offer expedited boarding or pre-boarding, similar to aircrafts. If someone needs extra time or assistance, they may be able to board earlier on that cruise. So the takeaway, again, is the planning ahead, but being thorough in your research to know what are your options along with what are your rights. Doing this in advance, labeling your mobility devices. There recently, in the last year, was a situation where an airline was transporting some wheelchair athletes. There was 30 wheelchair users on one plane. And when they transported the chairs, for whatever reason, they removed all of the wheels from each of the chairs. So that upon arrival, all of the passengers got off or took the transport chairs off of the plane, only to find all of their 30 wheelchairs disassembled, all the wheels in a pile, and had to then spend hours sorting through whose wheel belonged to which chair. So labeling your mobility devices is very important as well. And on the screen is an image of someone in an airport terminal using a wheelchair. And next slide.
Yeah, I think, Laura, I'll also add, I was going to add this previously, that I have a couple of friends that are, individuals I went to school with or just know of from working in the therapy field that have gone into accessible travel agent fields. So those are available for individuals with disabilities. I'm sure there's a cost to that, but those professionals are trained in disability and ensuring that the people they're working with receive those accommodations for travel.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
This is Angie. Personal transportation options. This slide includes 3 images that are examples of adaptive recreation and personal mobility equipment. First image shows an individual using an adaptive hand cycle outdoors. The next image is a tracked all-terrain powered mobility device. And then the next image is an individual using adaptive mobility equipment while hunting in a snowy terrain. So to clarify, it's not somebody who's just stuck in the snow with just being snowed there and left. They are intentionally hunting in the terrain with snow all over them. The picture is funny to me and very cold. When we talk about personal transportation and mobility, that can also include adaptive recreational access, not just traditional transportation. For some individuals, mobility may include the adaptive bicycles, the hand cycle that's in this image, all-terrain wheelchairs, or specialized outdoor mobility devices. Some communities and counties in Wisconsin offer access to track chairs, which are powered all-terrain mobility devices that can navigate the snow, like indicated in that image, mud trails, sand, uneven terrain. Here in Wisconsin, some of our independent living centers through the WisTech program also offer track chairs that are available again for lending. And I believe, Laura, you probably have a link to this somewhere on this PowerPoint, right?
I keep being muted. 3 of our independent living centers do have track chairs available, as well as Wisconsin DNR does offer some down at Blue Mountain State Park, as well as accessible cabins in some of our state parks. And there's a whole website through the DNR, as well as Wisconsin Outdoor Rec. The Department of Outdoor Rec also has a wealth of resources and information around recreation transport.
This is Angie. Thank you, Laura. Yeah. And I highly suggest, if people haven't checked it out, to check it out. I've seen some of the accessible locations and I've been blown away by how actually well done it is. So, and I do think that it's an important aspect of transportation to discuss, because as we were saying earlier, transportation is about more than just getting from one location to the next. It's about recreation, social participation, outdoor access, independence, and quality of life. So accessibility to our personal transportation options is important. Next.
All right. So the next slide sort of reviews a scenario of how an individual might access accessible transportation utilizing a couple of funding sources. And this is a personal scenario. Having worked with waiver programs for the last about 10 years, I've had the ability to work with a lot of individuals working with DVR, IRIS, sometimes children's waiver, to access accessible transportation through those waiver programs. So being able to access that funding usually requires an accessibility assessment. So sitting down with the individual, reviewing their personal needs, their disabilities, their strengths, what they're using for transportation currently, maybe considering do they want to drive in the future. So there's a lot of things to consider, but one of my favorite sort of situations was meeting a high school senior who was just about ready to graduate, and she started working with DVR. Her plan was to attend local university. She had a disability of spina bifida. And if I remember correctly, when she was in high school, she was using arm crutches all the time. That was when I initially met her. So she was able to access DVR funds to get a modified vehicle. At that time, she had her permit. She had passed her, written permit exam. She had gone through the CDRS training and assessing her for driving, and it was recommended that she, get an accessible van for the days that she wasn't able to use her arm crutches, which were starting to become more frequently. They wanted her also to be able to have wheelchair access to that van in the event she wasn't going to be able to transfer into the vehicle seat. So she received a modified vehicle. She used that vehicle all through college and drove herself most of the time. Sometimes, she lived with her parents and they would assist with that. But I got to meet her again 4 years later after she had been using that van every single day and reassess her situation for accessibility and a new accessible vehicle. So initially she had utilized DVR funds. She purchased the vehicle herself. DVR paid for the modifications. And sort of that second time around, after she had gone to college, was, working at a job for a year, she was able to access IRIS funds, and she purchased her own modified vehicle, or she purchased a vehicle that was modifiable. And then IRIS was able to pay for those modifications. So just talking about funding sources, if individuals with disabilities do have access to those programs, it is possible through that assessment process to receive the most cost-effective modifications. So just a really fun scenario. Kind of wish I knew what she was up to these days, but yeah, just a fun scenario of how my role as an assessor can sort of see things through multiple times. And the last slide, we have the resources, questions slide. The The link at the top is for the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association, or NMEDA. As I discussed earlier, this is just a really great website to learn about all things adaptive vehicles, adaptive driving. The next link is for WisLoan. WisLoan is the program that allows individuals to apply for a loan to purchase adaptive equipment for transportation. So modifying a vehicle, purchasing that modified vehicle. Usually WisLoan has less stringent guidelines as far as being a lender. So the interest rate, I think, is usually around 4%, 5%. Don't quote me on that, but it can be lower than like bank rates or other loans. So individuals with limited access to funding or living on a limited budget are able to access WisLoan through their local independent living center and apply for funding to pay for assistive technology and vehicle modifications or equipment. And then the last link is a link to the CAMS training. CAMS training is put together by NMEDA, the individuals in the top link, and it is a comprehensive training on all things adaptive equipment, modified vehicles, processes, and learning more about how to help yourself or somebody you care about or a caregiver for get modifications and other types of adaptive equipment, whether they're the passenger or the driver. So we won't go into questions at this point. Any other thoughts, Lisa or Angie? Or Laura or Angie, I'm sorry.
Thank you both very, very much for your comprehensive information on getting from point A to B in accessible transportation. There's a lot more to it than we might think of initially. So again, thank you for attending the first WisTech webinar for 2026. This will be archived on the YouTube channel, and stay tuned for the next 3 webinars coming up later this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.